The grand chamber of the Galactic Council stretched across a space so vast that clouds formed near its ceiling. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sectors, each one looking down at the human delegation standing in the center of the floor. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood with his shoulders straight and his hands clasped behind his back. Beside him stood Commander Lisa Hayes and Chief Negotiator Kevin Brooks. All three wore the dark blue uniforms of the United Nations Diplomatic Corps. All three knew this meeting would not go well. The Xanthari representative spoke first. Krellis was a towering insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the chamber's lights in 1,000 different directions. His mandibles clicked together as he spoke through his translator device. The words came out harsh and dismissive. He said that humanity's request for equal voting rights was absurd. He said that humans had only been in space for 300 years, while the youngest council member had been spacefaring for over 2,000. He said that giving humans equal status would be like giving children the same authority as adults. Several other representatives chittered and hummed in what Daniel recognized as laughter. Daniel waited for Krellix to finish. He had learned patience during his 15 years as a diplomat. He had learned to swallow anger and respond with calm reason. He began to speak about humanity's contributions to galactic trade and security. He mentioned the human colony ships that had explored and mapped 17 new systems in the past decade. He talked about human medical research that had cured the Vorkan plague just 2 years ago. He reminded the Council that humanity had kept its borders secure and never initiated conflict with any neighboring species. The ancient Eldari overlord Tharn interrupted him. Tharn was a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline shell that floated above his designated platform. His voice boomed through the chamber without need for translation. He told Daniel to stop wasting the Council's time. He said humanity's contributions were minimal compared to the major powers. He said humans were useful as traders and laborers but lacked the wisdom and strength to sit as equals among the great species of the galaxy. He then made a gesture with one of his energy tendrils that caused several representatives to laugh again. Kevin Brooks stepped forward and tried a different approach. He spoke about the legal frameworks that governed Council membership. He cited precedents from when the Drool and the Solarian species had been admitted with less spacefaring experience than humanity currently possessed. He pointed out that the Council's own charter stated that any species demonstrating technological advancement, peaceful intentions, and stable governance could apply for full membership. Humanity met all 3 criteria. A Vorquin representative named Gathel responded. The Vorkin were thick-bodied beings with 6 legs and crystalline growths covering their backs. Gathel's voice was a low rumble. He said the charter was written by the founding species, and they could interpret it however they wished. He said humanity had demonstrated nothing except an ability to breed quickly and spread across space like an infestation. He suggested that humans would be better served by accepting a client status under Vorquin protection. Several other species murmured in agreement. Lisa Hayes felt her jaw clench. She had served in the human fleet for 20 years before joining the diplomatic service. She had commanded ships in border skirmishes. She had lost crew members to pirate raids that the Council refused to help stop. She had watched from her ship's bridge as Xanthari warships attacked a civilian transport near Proxima Station. 4,000 colonists had died in that attack. Women and children. Families moving to a new world to start fresh lives. The Council had called it an accident and refused to investigate further. Lisa had filed 17 reports. All 17 had been ignored. Daniel Carter raised his hand to request the floor again. The Eldari overlord granted it with obvious reluctance. Daniel spoke about the recent incidents along humanity's borders. He mentioned the 3 colony worlds that Council species had claimed, despite clear human settlements already existing there. He talked about trade vessels that had been seized without cause. He brought up the Proxima Station massacre. He asked the Council how humanity could trust an organization that allowed such actions against its own applicant members. Tharn's energy form pulsed with what might have been anger. He declared that the Proxima incident had been investigated and closed. He said the colony disputes were matters of interpretation regarding settlement laws. He said humanity's complaints were becoming tiresome. Then he made an announcement that caused Daniel's blood to run cold. The Council had discussed humanity's status extensively over the past month. They had reached a decision. Humanity would be offered a new classification called Developing Species Status. This status would allow humans to trade within Council space and maintain existing colonies, but would place them under Council oversight. Human military vessels would require Council permission to travel through designated space lanes. Human expansion would be subject to Council approval. Human diplomatic missions would be limited to observer status with no voting rights. Daniel stood very still. Around him, he could feel Lisa and Kevin tensing. This was worse than rejection. This was subjugation. The Council wasn't denying humanity membership. They were trying to turn humanity into a vassal state. Kevin began to speak, his voice rising with anger. But Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. Daniel had not become humanity's chief ambassador by losing his composure in critical moments. He asked Tharn what would happen if humanity rejected this developing species status. Tharn replied that humanity would be considered a rogue state. Trade agreements would be terminated. Council species would be advised to avoid human space. Military protection from the Council fleet would be withdrawn. Essentially, humanity would be isolated and cut off from the greater galactic community. It was economic warfare dressed up as diplomatic language. It was a threat designed to force compliance. Daniel looked at Lisa and Kevin. He saw his own anger reflected in their eyes. He saw the frustration of years spent trying to earn respect from species that viewed humanity as inferior. He saw the faces of those 4,000 dead colonists. He saw every insult, every dismissal, every condescending comment from beings who thought themselves superior simply because their species had reached space earlier. He made his decision. He turned back to face the assembled council. His voice when he spoke was calm and clear, and carried to every corner of that vast chamber. He said that humanity had come to this council in good faith. Humanity had followed every rule and met every requirement. Humanity had shown patience and restraint in the face of provocation. Humanity had hoped to join the galactic community as partners and friends. But it was clear now that the council did not want partners. The council wanted servants. Therefore, effective immediately, humanity was withdrawing its application for membership. Humanity was severing all diplomatic ties with the Galactic Council. Humanity would no longer participate in this institution. The chamber erupted in noise. Some representatives seemed shocked. Others appeared amused. Krelix clicked his mandibles in what passed for laughter among the Zenthari. Gathel rumbled something about humans being too proud for their own good. Tharn's energy form pulsed rapidly as he demanded order. He told Daniel that humanity was making a grave mistake. He warned that isolation would harm humanity far more than it would harm the Council. He suggested that Daniel reconsider before taking such a drastic step. Daniel Carter smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. He said humanity would take its chances. Then he turned and walked toward the chamber's exit. Lisa Hayes and Kevin Brooks fell into step beside him. Behind them, the Council representatives continued their discussions as if the humans had already been forgotten. That would prove to be their greatest mistake. 3 months passed after humanity's departure from the Galactic Council, and nobody seemed particularly concerned. The Vorquin moved quickly to claim the abandoned human embassy on Nexus Prime. They stripped it of furniture and equipment within a week. The Zenthari filed territorial claims on 4 human colony worlds in the outer sectors. According to their legal team, these worlds had been under dispute anyway, and humanity's withdrawal from Council protection meant the claims could be processed without opposition. The Drool Trade Consortium began rerouting shipping lanes that had previously connected to human space. They announced new profit projections based on capturing humanity's former trade partners. The Council held a celebration on the 40th day after humanity's withdrawal. Representatives gathered in the Grand Hall where Daniel Carter had made his final statement. They drank fermented liquids from a dozen different worlds. They congratulated themselves on maintaining the Council's integrity and standards. Overlord Tharn gave a speech about how the Council had remained strong by refusing to compromise its principles. Krelix announced that the Zenthari military would be conducting operations in former human border regions to maintain security. Nobody questioned what that meant. Nobody seemed to care. Admiral Greg Patterson commanded the Council's first expeditionary fleet. He was a career military officer from the Terran colonies who had left human service 20 years ago to join the Council's unified forces. He had risen through the ranks by being competent and reliable. He followed orders without asking uncomfortable questions. When the Council ordered him to take his fleet into human space and secure strategic positions, he accepted the mission without hesitation. His fleet consisted of 800 warships representing 12 different species. It was the largest military force the Council had assembled in over a century. The mission briefing was straightforward. Patterson would lead his fleet across the human border near Beta Centauri. From there, he would proceed to key human colonies and installations. The goal was to demonstrate Council authority and force humanity back to the negotiating table on acceptable terms. The Council expected minimal resistance. Human military capabilities were well documented. Their ships were adequate but not exceptional. Their weapons were conventional. Their tactics were predictable. The analysts predicted that humanity would capitulate within weeks once they saw the size of the fleet arrayed against them. Patterson's flagship was the Eternal Dawn, a massive dreadnought built by the Eldari 40 years ago. It stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to level a continent. On the bridge, Patterson stood surrounded by officers from 8 different species. His communications officer was a drool named Vexilon. His tactical officer was Zenthari. His navigation officer was Vorquin. The Council prided itself on this diversity. Patterson had learned to work with all of them despite their different customs and communication styles. The fleet crossed into human space on the 75th day after humanity's withdrawal. Patterson expected alarms to sound. He expected defense platforms to activate. He expected at minimum some kind of automated warning system telling them they were entering restricted territory. Instead, there was nothing. The border was completely silent. No ships patrolled the area. No satellites transmitted challenges. The vast sensor arrays that had monitored this border for decades were dark and cold. Vexilon ran multiple scans. His tentacles moved rapidly over his console as he checked and rechecked the readings. He reported that he was detecting no active transmissions anywhere in the system. No ship traffic. No colony broadcasts. No commercial signals. Nothing at all. Patterson ordered the fleet to proceed deeper into human territory. They moved carefully, expecting an ambush at any moment. Days passed. They encountered only silence. The first human colony they reached was New Boston in the Tau Ceti system. It had been a thriving settlement of 30,000 people. The orbital platforms were intact but powered down. The planetary installations showed no heat signatures. Patterson sent landing teams to investigate. They found empty streets and abandoned buildings. Food was still in refrigerators. Personal belongings remained in homes. It looked as if everyone had simply walked away one day and never returned. The landing team commander reported that there were no signs of struggle or panic. It appeared to be an organized evacuation, the pattern repeated at every location. New Seattle was empty. Port Armstrong on Mars orbit was deserted. The mining colonies in the asteroid belt were abandoned. Every human settlement they found had been evacuated cleanly and completely. Patterson's fleet pushed deeper into human space, finding the same thing everywhere. Empty cities, dark stations, silent worlds. It was like exploring a graveyard. The ships moved through systems that should have been full of life and activity, but instead contained only ghosts. After 2 weeks of travel, Patterson's fleet reached the Sol system itself. Earth hung in space like a blue jewel. Patterson had read about humanity's homeworld. He knew it was precious to them beyond any rational calculation. He knew they called it the cradle of their species. He expected to find Earth defended by whatever forces humanity could muster. He expected a last stand. Instead, he found more silence. Earth's orbital stations were dark. The massive military platforms that had guarded the planet were offline and drifting. The moon bases showed no activity. Mars colonies registered 0 life signs. Even the automated defense satellites had been deactivated and their cores removed. Patterson ordered a full system scan. The results came back the same everywhere. Nobody was home. Humanity had not just withdrawn from Council space, they had abandoned their entire civilization. Patterson stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn and stared at Earth on the main view screen. His tactical officer suggested they claim the system for the Council. His communications officer recommended they establish a garrison. Patterson ignored them both. Something was wrong. Humanity had not run away in panic. This evacuation had been planned and executed with precision. Every ship was gone. Every citizen was gone. Even the automated systems had been carefully shut down. This was not defeat. This was preparation. The bridge crew began to relax as days passed without incident. They started to believe that humanity had truly fled. They talked about how the humans had proven themselves cowards after all their brave words. They discussed which species would get to claim which former human territories. Patterson let them talk, but he did not join in. He had served alongside humans for 10 years before joining the Council fleet. He knew how they thought. He knew how they planned. He knew that humans did not give up their homes without reason. On the third day in the Sol system, something changed. The sensors began picking up unusual readings at the edge of the Oort cloud. Vexlin reported spatial distortions consistent with ships translating from faster-than-light travel. Patterson ordered the fleet to battle stations. The distortions grew stronger. Whatever was coming was big, very big. Patterson's tactical displays began lighting up with contact warnings. 1 ship, 10 ships, 50 ships. The numbers kept climbing. The first vessel fully materialized, and Patterson felt his blood run cold. It was a human ship, but not like any human design in the Council databases. It stretched 5 kilometers long and bristled with weapons batteries he could not identify. Its hull plating shimmered with energy fields that his sensors could not analyze. The designation painted on its side read UNS Retribution. Behind it came more ships. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Each one bearing the same advanced design. Each one radiating power signatures that dwarfed anything in Patterson's fleet. Patterson tried to open a hailing channel. His voice came out steady despite the fear crawling up his spine. He identified himself and his fleet. He stated his authority as a Council admiral. He demanded that the human ships identify themselves and explain their presence. There was a long pause. Then a response came through. The voice was female, cold, and absolutely devoid of mercy. The woman on the screen wore a human military uniform that Patterson did not recognize. Her rank insignia indicated a captain. Her name tag read Sanders. She looked directly at Patterson through the view screen, and her eyes held something that made him want to order an immediate retreat. She told him that he was in the Sol system. She told him he was in humanity's home. She told him he was uninvited. Then she gave him 3 minutes to begin withdrawal, or his fleet would be considered hostile. Patterson tried to argue. He invoked Council authority. He cited the legal precedents for his mission. He warned that attacking a Council fleet would bring the full weight of galactic civilization down on humanity. Captain Sanders listened to all of this without expression. Then she cut the channel. Patterson's tactical displays exploded with warnings. Every ship in his fleet was being targeted. Hundreds of targeting locks painted his vessels. The human fleet began a slow advance. Patterson looked at his own weapon systems and realized with growing horror that he was outgunned. Badly outgunned. Whatever humanity had been doing during those silent months, they had not been hiding in fear. They had been building something terrible. Admiral Patterson gave the order to withdraw. His 800 ships turned and burned their engines at maximum power. The Council fleet had trained for many scenarios, but none of them involved running away from an inferior force. Except humanity was no longer inferior. The human fleet matched their speed effortlessly. The advanced vessels kept pace with the Council ships as if they were barely trying. Patterson watched his tactical displays and realized that the humans were not just matching his fleet's speed. They were holding back. They could go faster if they wanted. Captain Nicole Sanders stood on the bridge of the UNS Retribution and watched the Council fleet fleeing. Her executive officer was Commander Jake Cooper. He had served with her for 5 years and knew her moods well. He could see the cold anger in her eyes. He could see the way her hands gripped the armrests of her command chair. She had lost a sister in the Proxima Station massacre. She had spent 3 months training with the new fleet. She had memorized the names of every human who had died because the Council considered them expendable. Sanders opened a channel to the fleeing fleet. Her voice carried across space to every Council ship. She told them that humanity had spent centuries exploring the galaxy. She told them that humans had mapped systems the Council did not know existed. She told them that humanity had discovered technologies that the Council could not imagine. She said that while the Council had been comfortable and complacent, humanity had been learning and adapting and building. Every insult, every seized world, every murdered colonist had been recorded. Humanity remembered all of it. The human fleet began firing warning shots. Plasma bolts streaked past Council ships with perfect precision. Kinetic rounds crossed their bows within meters. Not a single shot hit its target because the humans did not want to hit them yet. They were demonstrating their accuracy. They were showing the Council fleet that every ship was at their mercy. Lieutenant Claire Morrison served aboard Patterson's flagship. She was human, but had left Earth before the withdrawal to pursue a career in the Council military. She stared at her tactical console and felt her stomach sink. The targeting solutions the human fleet was displaying required computer systems far beyond anything the Council possessed. 3 Vorkwin destroyers broke formation. Their commander decided to fight rather than run. It was a fatal mistake. The destroyers opened fire on the nearest human cruiser. Their weapons struck the energy shields protecting the human ship and dissipated like raindrops on glass. The human cruiser returned fire. 3 shots, 3 explosions. The Vorkwin destroyers simply ceased to exist. Their hulls were torn apart by weapons that released more energy in a single shot than most Council ships could generate in an hour. The debris clouds expanded rapidly. Patterson ordered his fleet to maintain formation and keep running. A Zenthari carrier named the Hive Queen tried a different approach. Krelix's cousin commanded that ship. He launched every fighter craft in his bays. 200 small attack ships swarmed toward the human fleet. They were fast and maneuverable. Council doctrine said that overwhelming numbers of fighters could break through any defense. The human point defense systems activated. Streams of accelerated projectiles filled space. Each round was guided by targeting computers that tracked multiple objects simultaneously. The fighters began exploding. 10 at a time, 20 at a time. The carrier captain watched in horror as his entire fighter wing was destroyed in less than 3 minutes. Not a single fighter reached the human fleet. Jake Cooper grinned as he watched the tactical displays. His weapons officer reported that point defense had performed perfectly. Every target had been eliminated. Ammunition expenditure was less than 5% of reserves. Cooper relayed this information to Sanders. She nodded but did not smile. She was not here for glory. She was here to deliver a message. She opened another channel to the Council fleet. She told them that humanity had designed these weapons specifically to counter every Council species. Humans had studied Zenthari fighter tactics for decades. They had analyzed Vorkwin shield frequencies. They had documented Drool armor compositions. Every weakness had been identified and exploited. Patterson's fleet continued its desperate run toward the Beta Centauri jump point. If they could reach it, they could escape into Council space where reinforcements might be available. But the human fleet was herding them like animals. Every time a Council ship tried to break away, human vessels would cut it off. Every time the formation tried to scatter, warning shots would force them back together. The humans were controlling the entire battlefield. They were demonstrating complete tactical superiority. Patterson had commanded fleets for 30 years. He knew when he was beaten. The Eternal Dawn took a glancing hit when its captain tried to change course too quickly. A human destroyer fired a single shot that clipped the massive dreadnought's port side. The impact sheared away 20 meters of armor plating and exposed 3 decks to space. 18 crew members died instantly. Patterson felt his ship shudder. His damage control teams reported that the shot had been precisely calculated to wound, but not kill. The humans were still playing with them. They were showing that they could destroy any ship at any time. They were making Patterson's fleet feel helpless. Commander Lisa Hayes served aboard the UNS Justice. She had been at Proxima Station. She had watched through her ship's sensors as the civilian transport burned. She had listened to the distress calls. She had heard the screams. Now she sat in the command chair of a ship powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. She watched the Council vessels running. She felt no satisfaction. She felt only the cold certainty that this had been necessary. The galaxy respected strength. Humanity had become strong. The Council fleet finally reached the jump point. Patterson gave the order to translate to faster-than-light travel. His ships began disappearing as they entered jump space. The human fleet did not pursue beyond the border. They held position at the edge of human territory like guards marking a line that must not be crossed. As the last Council ship prepared to jump, Sanders opened one final channel. She told Patterson to return to the Council. She told him to report everything he had seen. She told him to warn his leaders that humanity was done asking for respect. The next time they met, it would be at the Council homeworlds. Then she cut the channel. Patterson's ship completed its jump. The Eternal Dawn emerged in Council space badly damaged and carrying terrified survivors. The admiral sat in his command chair and tried to process what had happened. His fleet had been considered the strongest military force in the galaxy. It had been humiliated by a species the Council had dismissed as inferior. How had humanity achieved such advancement in only 3 months? Where had they built those ships? Where had they gone during the evacuation? The questions swirled through his mind, but he had no answers. Claire Morrison approached Patterson on the bridge. She had been silent during the entire encounter. Now she spoke quietly so only he could hear. She told him that she had suspected something like this. She said that humans had always been good at keeping secrets. She said that the colony worlds the Council knew about were probably just the visible settlements. Humanity had likely been exploring and building in hidden systems for decades. They had been preparing for the day when the Council would show its true nature. That day had come. Humanity had been ready. Patterson ordered his communications officer to send an emergency transmission to the Council. He composed his report while medical teams treated his wounded crew and engineers assessed the damage to his flagship. He wrote about the human fleet's capabilities. He detailed their weapons technology and tactical superiority. He warned that humanity now possessed the power to threaten every Council world. His hands shook slightly as he transmitted the report. He knew the Council would not want to believe him. He knew they would accuse him of cowardice or exaggeration, but he also knew that everything he wrote was true. On the bridge of the Retribution, Sanders watched the Council fleet disappear. Her crew cheered. They had won without losing a single ship. They had shown their power to the species that had called humanity weak. Sanders did not join the celebration. She turned to Jake Cooper and told him to prepare the fleet for Phase 2. They had driven off the Council's scouts. Now it was time to take the fight to their enemies. Humanity had departed in silence. Humanity would return in thunder. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within hours of receiving Admiral Patterson's report. The grand chamber that had seemed so impressive during normal sessions now felt claustrophobic, as representatives from 47 species crowded together. Everyone talked at once. Voices rose in dozens of languages. Translators struggled to keep up with the chaos. Overlord Tharn finally restored order by flooding the chamber with a pulse of energy that made every being present feel a moment of physical discomfort. The room fell silent. Patterson stood in the center of the chamber where Daniel Carter had stood 3 months ago. He was still in his uniform. He had not slept since the encounter in Sol System. His report scrolled across holographic displays visible to every representative. The numbers were damning. 800 ships against approximately 300 human vessels. The Council fleet had been completely outmatched. 3 ships destroyed, 1 capital ship heavily damaged, hundreds of casualties, 0 human losses. The military superiority the Council had taken for granted no longer existed. Krelix was the first to speak. The Zenthari representative's mandibles clicked rapidly as he accused Patterson of incompetence. He suggested that the Admiral had panicked and fled from a much smaller force. He claimed that human technology could not have advanced so quickly. He demanded Patterson's removal from command and a proper investigation. Several other representatives murmured agreement. They wanted to believe that their comfortable assumptions about galactic power dynamics were still true. They wanted to believe that humanity remained weak and manageable. Tharn silenced the dissent. His energy form pulsed with barely contained fury. He had reviewed Patterson's sensor logs personally. He had analyzed the tactical data. He knew that every word in the report was accurate. The Eldari had been spacefaring for over 10,000 years. They had encountered countless species. They had never seen technology advance so rapidly. Tharn declared that the Council faced a genuine crisis. Humanity had somehow acquired weapons and ships that exceeded Council capabilities. This could not be ignored or dismissed. A Drool representative named Voxtar suggested negotiation. His species valued trade above warfare. He proposed sending a diplomatic mission to humanity, offering better terms than before. Perhaps equal membership with full voting rights would satisfy them. Perhaps humanity would accept an apology for past grievances. Perhaps this entire situation could be resolved peacefully. His suggestion was met with scorn from the military representatives. Gathel rumbled that showing weakness now would encourage humanity to press their advantage. The Vorkan had built their empire on strength. They did not negotiate from positions of weakness. While the Council argued something was happening across their territory, Human ships began appearing at the borders of Council space, not invasion fleets, single vessels. They would translate into a system, broadcast a message, then jump away before local defense forces could respond. The messages were all identical. They were recorded by General Scott Hamilton, Supreme Commander of Human Defense Forces. Hamilton was a veteran of 40 years of military service. His face appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. Hamilton's message was simple and direct. He said that humanity had sought peace through diplomacy for decades. Humanity had believed in the principles the Council claimed to uphold. Humanity had trusted that reason and goodwill would be sufficient. The Council had proven otherwise. The Council had taught humanity that the galaxy respected only strength. Humanity had learned that lesson. Now the galaxy would see what humans could accomplish when they stopped asking permission and started taking action. He said humanity was not interested in conquest. They wanted recognition, respect, and justice for past crimes. The message included specific demands. The Council would formally recognize humanity as a sovereign power with full rights and privileges. The Council would pay reparations for the destruction of human colonies and the murder of human citizens. The Council would surrender the individuals responsible for ordering attacks on human civilians. These individuals would face trial under human law. The Council had 30 days to respond. If the demands were not met, humanity would consider itself at war with the Galactic Council. The message ended with Hamilton's face fading to black. Then came footage of the human fleet. Hundreds of advanced warships in perfect formation, a demonstration of the power backing up those demands. Nexus Prime erupted into panic. The Council's capital world had never been threatened in its 3,000-year history. Now human ships prowled just outside the system's edge. They did not attack. They simply watched. Their presence was a constant reminder that the Council's most secure world was no longer safe. Citizens began fleeing. Transport ships were booked solid for weeks. The wealthy paid enormous sums to secure passage away from Nexus Prime. The Council's own members began moving their families to safer locations. Daniel Carter reappeared during this chaos. His face was broadcast on the same channels Hamilton had used. But where Hamilton represented military power, Carter represented political will. He spoke from what appeared to be a massive space station. Behind him, through the viewports, countless ships could be seen. Carter explained that humanity had not been hiding during their silence. They had been building. The station he spoke from was called New Earth. It was one of 15 such stations scattered across hidden systems. Each station housed millions of humans. Each one served as an industrial and military hub. Humanity had evacuated their known worlds not in defeat but in strategy. They had moved their entire civilization to locations the Council could not find. Carter continued speaking. He said that humanity had always been good at adapting. When the Council rejected them, humans had simply created their own civilization beyond Council reach. They had found resource-rich systems in unexplored space. They had developed technologies by combining ideas from a dozen different scientific traditions. They had built a fleet specifically designed to challenge the Council's military might. All of this had been planned for years. Humanity had known that the Council would eventually show its true nature. Humans had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal their preparations. The Council chamber descended into chaos again. Representatives shouted accusations at each other. The Xanthari blamed the Vorquin for antagonizing humanity. The Vorquin blamed the Eldari for underestimating human potential. Everyone blamed everyone else. Nobody wanted to accept responsibility for creating an enemy that could destroy them. Tharn tried to restore order, but even his authority was questioned. Some representatives suggested surrendering to human demands immediately. Others called for total war. The Council that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was tearing itself apart. On the 5th day of the crisis, something happened that changed everything. A human fleet appeared at Xanthar, the Xanthari homeworld. Not 300 ships like at Sol system. Over 1,000 vessels translated into the system simultaneously. They took up positions surrounding the planet. They did not fire. They did not communicate. They simply positioned themselves in an unbreakable blockade. No ships could enter or leave. The Xanthari had always been the Council's strongest military power. Now their homeworld was hostage. Krellix received a private communication from Captain Sanders. She told him that his cousin, who commanded the Hive Queen, had survived the battle at Sol system. She said this was fortunate because Krellix would need family support in the coming days. She explained that humanity had blockaded Zenthar to make a point. The Council had seized human worlds without consequence. Now humans would take a Council world without firing a shot. Zenthar would remain blockaded until the Council accepted humanity's demands. Every day of delay would see another Council homeworld surrounded. Sanders recommended that Krellix convince his government to negotiate. The alternative was watching his species starve. Similar blockades appeared at other key worlds. The Vorquin military stronghold of Gath Prime found itself surrounded by human warships. The Drool trade hub of Vexlan Station was cut off from all commerce. Each blockade was perfectly executed. Each one demonstrated that humanity could strike anywhere in Council space. The message was clear and undeniable. The balance of power had shifted. The species that had been dismissed as inferior now held the fate of the galaxy in their hands. Patterson watched all of this from his damaged flagship. He had tried to warn them. He had told the Council exactly what they faced. They had not listened. Now humanity was demonstrating its power in a way that could not be ignored. He thought about the humans he had served with years ago. He remembered their patience and determination. He remembered how they never forgot a slight and never forgave an injustice. He had known this was coming. The galaxy had pushed humanity too far. Now everyone would pay the price for that mistake. The blockades lasted 12 days before the Council broke. Each day saw supplies running lower on the surrounded worlds. Each day saw panic spreading further through Council territory. The species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia discovered what helplessness felt like. They tried to break the blockades with military force. Every attempt failed. Human point defense systems destroyed attacking ships before they got within weapons range. The Council fleets were using technology that was decades behind what humanity now possessed. It was not a fair fight because humanity had designed these weapons specifically to counter Council tactics. On the 13th day, Overlord Tharn himself contacted Daniel Carter directly. The ancient Eldari's energy form flickered with what might have been exhaustion or defeat. He said the Council was prepared to discuss terms. Carter replied that there was nothing to discuss. Humanity's demands had been clearly stated. The Council would accept them or face escalation. Tharn asked what escalation meant. Carter's expression did not change as he explained that the current blockades had been gentle. Humanity could blockade every Council world simultaneously. Humanity could cut off all trade and communication across the entire galactic community. Or humanity could simply start destroying military installations. The choice belonged to the Council. Tharn agreed to a summit. It would be held at Concordia Prime, the neutral station where humanity had made its final withdrawal from Council participation. The location was symbolic. This was where the Council had last dismissed human concerns. This was where everything had gone wrong. Now representatives from both sides would meet again under very different circumstances. The Council sent its full leadership. Tharn led the delegation. Krellix came representing the Zenthari. Gathel represented the Vorquin. Every major species sent their highest officials. Humanity sent 5 people. Daniel Carter returned as chief negotiator. He brought Commander Lisa Hayes and Kevin Brooks from his original diplomatic team. He also brought General Scott Hamilton and Captain Nicole Sanders. The human delegation arrived on a single shuttle. They walked into the Grand Conference Chamber, where hundreds of Council representatives waited. Carter took his seat at the head of the table. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. 3 months ago, humans had stood in the center of the Council chamber like supplicants begging for acceptance. Now they sat at the head of the negotiating table like conquerors dictating terms. The negotiations lasted 3 days, but the outcome was never in doubt. The Council had no leverage. Their military was outmatched. Their homeworlds were hostage. Their economy was crippled by the blockades. They had only one choice, and that was to accept whatever humanity demanded. Carter presented the terms with the same calm voice he had used during years of fruitless diplomacy. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign power with full rights and privileges. All territorial disputes would be resolved in humanity's favor. The Council would pay reparations totaling 15 trillion credits to compensate for destroyed colonies and murdered citizens. The Council representatives tried to negotiate on the reparations amount. Carter refused to budge. He brought up specific incidents. The Proxima Station massacre had killed 4,000 people. The Council would pay 1 million credits per victim. The seizure of the colony world of New Britannia had displaced 80,000 settlers. The Council would compensate them for their losses and fund their return. Every single crime committed against humanity would be paid for. Kevin Brooks presented detailed documentation. Names, dates, locations. Humanity had kept records of everything. The accounting was precise and damning. Krelix objected when Carter demanded the surrender of individuals responsible for ordering attacks on human civilians. He claimed that his military commanders had been following Council policy. He said they should not be held personally accountable for decisions made at the government level. Sanders leaned forward and spoke for the first time. Her voice was cold as she told Krelix that his cousin had commanded the ship that destroyed the transport at Proxima Station. She said she had his confession recorded during the battle. She said that every officer who gave illegal orders would face trial. Krelix had a choice. He could surrender these individuals to human justice, or humanity would come collect them by force. She recommended he choose wisely. The Council agreed to all demands. They had no alternative. The treaty was drafted and signed within hours. Every representative placed their mark on the document. Some did so with visible anger. Others seemed resigned. A few looked almost relieved that the crisis was ending. Tharn was the last to sign. His energy form pulsed weakly as he authorized the agreement. He told Carter that humanity had won, but warned that power corrupted all species eventually. He said humans would become just like the Council given enough time. Carter smiled at that. He said humanity would take their chances. At least humans would be making their own mistakes rather than suffering under someone else's arrogance. The blockades lifted within hours of the treaty signing. Human fleets withdrew from Council homeworlds. The Xanthari, Vorquin, and other species watched the advanced warships depart. Some felt relief. Others felt humiliation. All of them understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The species that controlled the Council were no longer the dominant powers. Humanity had risen to challenge them and won. The implications would reshape galactic politics for generations. Humanity did not immediately join the Council. Carter announced that humans would maintain observer status while evaluating whether the Council could reform itself. He said the organization had proven corrupt and incompetent. He said humanity would consider membership only if the Council demonstrated genuine commitment to justice and equality. Until then, humanity would maintain its own territory and defend its own interests. The Council could either learn to respect that or face the consequences. The choice was theirs. The transition period was difficult for everyone. Council species had to adjust to a new reality, where humanity held significant power. Trade agreements were renegotiated on more favorable terms for humans. Territorial boundaries were redrawn. The species that had seized human colonies found themselves forced to abandon those worlds and pay compensation. The Xanthari military was humiliated by having to surrender officers for trial. Several were convicted of war crimes and imprisoned. Krelix resigned from his position on the Council in disgrace. His family's influence never recovered. Admiral Patterson was promoted despite his fleet's defeat. The Council recognized that he had saved hundreds of ships by ordering a retreat, rather than fighting a hopeless battle. He was given command of the Council's defensive forces with orders to study human tactics and develop countermeasures. He knew this was an impossible task. Humanity's technological advantage was too great, but he accepted the position and did his best. He also maintained contact with Claire Morrison, who had resigned from Council service to return to human space. She occasionally sent him information about human developments, not enough to compromise security, but enough to keep him from making stupid mistakes. General Hamilton oversaw the establishment of human defense forces as the galaxy's newest military power. The fleet that had been built in secret became humanity's public deterrent. 15 massive space stations served as humanity's new colonies. New Earth became the capital. Other stations were named after cities and concepts that had meaning to human culture. New London, New Tokyo, New Hope, New Beginning. Each one housed millions of people and served as both home and fortress. Humanity had learned that security came from strength, and they maintained that strength vigilantly. Captain Sanders was promoted to admiral and given command of the Second Fleet. She oversaw the protection of human territory and occasionally conducted missions into Council space to ensure compliance with treaty terms. She never forgot the faces of those who died at Proxima Station. She never forgot why humanity had been forced to become what they were. She told her crews that vigilance was the price of survival. The galaxy had shown humanity what happened to weak species. Humans would never be weak again. Daniel Carter eventually did return to the Council as humanity's representative, but he came as an equal, not a supplicant. He sat in the section reserved for major powers. His vote carried the same weight as the Eldari or Zenthari. When he spoke, the chamber listened. The species that had dismissed him now sought his favor. Humanity controlled advanced technology that every council member wanted access to. They controlled trade routes into previously unexplored space. They controlled military power that could tip the balance in any conflict. Carter used this leverage carefully. He advocated for reforms within the council. He pushed for laws protecting smaller species from exploitation. He worked to create the organization he had once believed the council could be. Lisa Hayes returned to Fleet Command. She led exploratory missions into uncharted space, continuing humanity's tradition of seeking new frontiers. She trained the next generation of human officers. She made sure they understood the lessons humanity had learned. Never trust blindly. Never assume goodwill. Never let anyone take what is yours without consequence. The galaxy was dangerous and humans needed to remain strong to survive. Her students graduated knowing that humanity's